And when you're talking about like, and I guess, I get what you're trying to do when you say advanced technique versus like, but to me, it doesn't, that's just not how my brain sees it. It's all, the only reason I would break it into advanced or not advanced is if I was teaching someone. And if I'm teaching someone, I'm manipulating if I'm teaching someone, the process I would take them through is different from if I was describing to somebody what the process we actually go through is. Does that make sense?
Okay. So let's just say that you have a very matrix kind of deeper concept. When I was just literally asking the question, international, you straighten your knee, land on a straight knee. International rhythm, you land on a flex knee. That is technique. That is the difference. Like all the other stuff is like is low-bearing fruit here. That's the low-bearing fruit of the techniques. The difference is we can talk about rhythmic action, but the funny part is when I first learned rhythm, they never said rotation. They only said pendulum lifting. They never.
I remember that.
We never talked about rotation.
I remember that.
What's in a body sense, and you're talking about how the hips move, makes no sense whatsoever.
It seemed like a thing that they just like wouldn't go into.
It wasn't rotation of the hip. It was pendulum swing of the hip, but it was never talking about rotation of it. And then no one ever talked about rib cage. So when I'm learning the dance, I'm like, oh, well, just hold this here and do this. And these were top professionals. Okay. So
yes, I totally feel you. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that was one of those things where it's like, well, we don't want to get into this right now because we want rhythm to be different than international. We want rhythm to be different than Latin. So let's not talk about this. So,
I think you're right. I think they were confused. I think they weren't sure. You know what I mean? They were the navigators, and they were looking into fog and just kind of trying to figure it out. I think they just
which to me said, and this goes back to my original part of the conversation where we were talking about. To me, it says that Latin wasn't going, well, hey, how do we be more like rhythm? They were already set. Rhythm's going, well, now let's not talk about rotation because we want to look different than this one. That means you don't have an identity. So, and now you're stealing stuff from Latin. So that tells me you don't have an identity. That's been my this conversation was.
Well, but keep in mind that.
Now I'm answering my own question now because it keeps steamrolling into other stuff. It's literally, I don't feel that they've had, and that's why they're arguing about it because they don't have an identity yet for it. Now, to go back to your point, maybe this means they're young. I get that. But my next question is it moving forward or is it still an argument point?
Oh, and I guess I would make my original point, which is I assume Latin is the same. But like it would be for me.
There's not a big argument as there is a rhythm. And I have heard the arguments.
I'm saying that the problems I would describe to you, it's unfair for like the viewers to, cause like I know nothing of Latin and I'm saying all these horrible things about rhythm.
But see, I never thought of
and I'm saying these things because of my high standards. So if I was in Latin, I might say these same horrible things about Latin.
You might.
So that's the point
I
want to stress.
He's not lying. Yeah, and I've never
because no one in Latin has ever described to me clearly what the difference is. Mm-hmm. They always leave out less details than I know. And these are Latin people describing to me the differences. So I've never felt like, but I've never sat down with the top Latin boys and heard them speak. Like I did that with rhythm, but I did not do that with Latin.
Yeah, I just think that it's not saying that they won't ever find their identity. I just think there's no identity, and that's why there's so much argument about it. In the Latin, and maybe I haven't been in enough circles in Latin, but I haven't seen that level.
There's more of an identity.
I haven't seen that level of arguing over the topic of what it is. I have not seen it there.
Well, there's got to be some threshold where it's like, okay, everyone's satisfied enough with it, and they just kind of
yeah. But is it moving past? But is it moving past that argument? Because how long have we been talking about this? You can say it's young, but I got into dance in 2003. And that argument was happening then. and it's 2020, we've got COVID going on, and the same argument is still happening. So what am I missing? And now, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I don't have a problem with that, though. I don't have a problem with them having a higher standard.
It's not about a higher standard. They're just disagreeing on what it should look like.
Well, but I feel like they do in Latin too.
And here's the thing I like about rhythm. There's no style of dance I do not like. And I don't think one is greater or lesser than the other one. They're all different. We had this conversation. I don't think they all tell a different story. And that's what they should tell. Rhythm is just, they need an identity and stick with it. Yes, you can evolve, but have an identity. Now that you're saying, well, let's take Latin.
I mean, I don't feel like, I don't have any problem then with, I think, what you're saying. I don't have any problem with their identity. I don't feel like they're lacking in that. See, like, I do truly believe that, you know, keep it, like, they went through Latin, and all those people who are in Latin, now this rhythm thing is coming out, and they're wanting to be even more picky about it than they were with Latin. Because, you know, Latin wasn't super clear right away either, you know what I mean?
Sure
but now, because they've made it to that point, they understand that. And so now all of them have these, in a sense, higher standards. Well, no, they are higher standards than they had before. So now it's harder to get everything to go past all the filters and get it to be agreed upon, because there's more details being studied rather than them being added on afterward, which is what, you know, is really actually still what's happening with rhythm. So I don't really mind it. It doesn't bother me.
Can I ask you an honest question?
Yeah.
Is it not that they don't have an identity, but the factions at the top want to make sure that their version of it wins? Because we know that there's, and I'm going to say this right now, there are factions at the top, and I will say that some are not within a certain camp that want it to be this way.
So I'm sure that there are some. I mean, yeah, there's always people who like
this is honest
studying the new, and they just want their way of doing to stay around because it's what makes them relevant. But you know, ultimately, I think that all gets beaten out by quality, and quality gets figured out eventually. So I don't know if I were to truly look at changing American rhythm in any way. The first thought I think that goes into my mind, and this is literally just off the top of my head because I don't think it needs to be changed. I think it needs to be studied. The first thought that goes into my mind is like the dances. So it's not necessarily changing the dances, but being more specific about the sounds of the styles of music played in each dance. Like it seems to me that so like Latin can get away with dancing to pop, to whatever, to mainstream stuff because it originally had not that. Like these were and they found these strict rules based off making these movements to these sounds, these very basic sounds, these repetitive noises. And then Americans kind of being created in this era where music is all, you get so many different sounds in music, and it's all, so it's in like, you know, American rhythm, I mean. So it's, doesn't have that kind of as a tool to help structure itself, you know, those basic, those types of things. So then they kind of steal stuff from Latin in that sense of things, which is why it's so similar. I mean, what confuses me, the biggest thing, is that there's an international cha-cha and an American rhythm cha-cha and an international rumba and an American rhythm rumba. That's confusing to me. But whatever. They're fun dances. We want to keep them in there. Fine. I'm okay with that. It just, then I think it needs to sound like the characteristics have to be more. Yeah, see, it's even hard for me to come up with something I want to change because I don't think all of it's been studied enough.
I just want it to be, like I said, this is me because I get that I kind of see where you are at this point. I want to see an identity of, to me, I don't think there's an identity of rhythm. I think that's what Sam and Bill are trying to bring up forth with a standardization, which would be, this is the standard identity of it, okay? Yes. We can agree on that. I think that's what they were trying to do, okay? Latin to me has had that for a while. The one thing I would say is I can't keep getting behind this rhythm is young, because I mean, what, mambo was what, the 50s? Swing was like the 20s? Okay, this is 100 years later. What are we talking about here?
Well, but no. Combining them together and changing the speeds and requiring a specific speed of them is changing the dance very much. So they've only been, they've only been the way they are now. You know what I'm saying? Like because I mean, technically, waltz is a part of American rhythm. If you go back far enough, you know what I mean? So it's really, this was indeed what everybody kind of treated it as, but shouldn't have. It was a style for fun. That's what it seems like American rhythm was created for. A style for fun. It seems to me that it was created by people who saw other really talented dancers and said, hey, I want to be called and labeled as good a dancer as that person is, even though I'm not. Like that is indeed, and that was what it was treated as. It shouldn't be treated as this, because it has developed enough that it can have its own identity. And I do not feel like its identity is in jeopardy whatsoever. I feel like as long as you keep to a specific time, beats per minute, beats per measure, you've automatically created an identity. And really, to go anywhere past that other than this is the party dance, this is the love dance, what is there to do? I see that. I see that swing is a party every single time it comes on. Whether I agree with the technique and the efficient body movement or not, no. But I see that it is swing, and that's what it's meant to be. When rumba comes on, I see that it's meant to be loving. Bolero confuses me a little bit. I like Bolero because I assume of the mesh of Latin dancers has got this like sometimes angry paso vibe to it, you know? So, but other than that, Bolero is also a love dance. I think Bolero looks more like actual sex to me than rumba does. Rumba to me looks like flirting, like the foreplay before you're about to sex, the flirting, you know, whereas Bolero looks like, oh baby, let's
well, that's what it was. I mean, if we actually once again, if you study the history of rumba, where our rumba came from, the style, which I can't remember the name, if the style that it was based off of was not a loving, it was more of a flirtatious.
So there you go. We're doing great.
To me, Bolero, it's like, it reminds me of international rumba. It's that slow kind of moment to moment and love kind of thing. So I agree with you. There are some things like, you know, if we get into other aspects of dance that, yes, I think sometimes, and this isn't about the style because we have tempi that we've agreed on, but right. I think sometimes you got these over ambitious, you know, people that are doing the music that go, well, let's do the same speed for American rhythm and the same speed for international, even though, and we're like, wow, this is kind of fast. And sometimes
that's a big mistake.
And sometimes you get those East Coast swings that are actually jives. So
those are the artists, okay? This is the sport, people. Play the speed, not the vibe. Okay, like, oh my God.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, physically wise, for me, it was describing the physical technique of each dance or the style itself, which to me, I feel that they haven't really kind of landed there. I feel I just haven't felt they've landed there.
Even hip lift technique has gaps.
Yeah. But at least they. So if we want to say that, to me, hip lift is the closest thing to somebody saying this should be the standard.
Yes. Okay? Yes.
My only issue now becomes, well, then why can't more people get on board with it? Which is a different conversation. That's a different conversation. That's a different conversation.
Whole different conversation.
And I now see what you were talking about. Dance. And now that I went down that rabbit hole and my eyes crossed, I understand what you were saying to begin with. So
and that's really the majority of what has happened. I feel like the hip lift technique, like everybody talked about, said negative things about it, and it was before I knew what it was, and I was studying it 8 hours every day. You know,
right?
What I mean?
Right, because you got. I mean, to be honest, like even watching competitions, you know, people that have started to study it, and you can see them doing it on the dance floor. but then they're losing to someone that, then they're losing to someone that's not doing it, which is,
exactly.
That's to me, why can't we agree then?
Well, and what's funny is that,
if that's
in that scenario, go ahead.
Go ahead.
In that scenario you're talking about, like, and that would happen all the time. Like, there was this camp one time for hip lift technique, and it was after we had been working on hip lift technique for a long time. And I'm not going to name names for this particular situation, but one of the current competitors who was placing higher than us came to the camp, and we saw this person at competitions all the time. And then the next time we saw him at a competition, someone commented and said, "Oh, he's now doing the hip lift technique." And this was just because he lifted his hip one time and delayed swinging his hips. So, like, the person in me who had been bleeding every day from scraping at and working on legitimately what hard at what, and still not understanding what hip lift technique is. And I know this person doesn't either, but this on viewer is sitting there calling it that. And it kills me. I'm like, he's not dancing hip lift technique. Just because he chose to do one thing that they did in hip lift technique, that does not mean that he is dancing hip lift technique. That means he is a student of dance. He took something from something else that he liked and applied it to his own dancing. But all of a sudden now he's a hip lift technique dancer. Now, I wouldn't say anything and make a big fuss about it, but that was how I felt. And so I was so angry inside all the time. This would happen all the time. People would call people hip lift technique dancers just because they do one delayed hip swing. And it's like, what the fuck? That's not, I'll have to bleep that. So
just put a parental warning at the bottom. This is not profanity. Children should not have watched at beyond this point. You're good.
That's right. I'll cut it right before this. And then this will be the next episode. I'll lead with that. But anyway, my point is that, these are, so many people looked at this concept and just speculated. And then not just because so many did it, then behind doors, people started talking about it. And they had serious discussions. These were people who had never come to any training for or discussed it with the creators of ever before. These are just people gathering behind closed doors or together in their own time, and they're making fun of something that none of them have had experience doing. And I know this has happened on several occasions. And these are higher up people that are doing it. And so when we start doing, and I wouldn't bring this up usually, but I did because, you kind of did the same. You know what I mean? Like, I'm doing now what I gave you a hard time about doing. Don't bring that shit up and then not serious things like that up and then not point out names or whatnot. But, this was a misconstrued concept. Everybody thought hip lift technique was something. And it really didn't even know what it was yet. You know what I mean? Like, that was.
And here's the difference to what you just said, Jonathan. The reason why I didn't say anything or come back at you is because I give credibility to you because I know you're a straight shooter and you wouldn't just lie to me about something. So I give you that credibility, buddy. Because
I appreciate
that's how I roll.
And it's not that I don't trust your word, because but I don't on this particular subject.
Yeah, I would never throw somebody I would never hold information back just to win an argument. I think you can't have.
That's my fault, Michael. Yeah,
you can't have debates like that. You honestly,
it's just that exact thing was so thrown around. You get what I'm saying?
And if it had been, and believe me, I'm the first person very analytical. If it had been a conversation where I'm like, this person's just throwing stuff out there, I would have been like, nah.
Yeah, absolutely. You call people out. You call me out on that here, and and I've been with you at these comps when you've called other people out on it, for sure. So I guess part of me felt like for the viewers at home, but you're absolutely right. You're one of the people who's like me. You're asking the questions.
I will be asking the questions, and I will validate what you're saying. So just know that. So to bring it on home, my viewpoint is, like I said, I just think that there's starting to be an identity And what confuses me and what makes me angry is why does it keep changing? And I get it, it's the ones that went at the top, but if there's something sound happening, like I don't think anyone's gonna go over to rhythm Latin and start dancing flex knees and go, oh yeah, let's let them win. I don't think that's gonna happen. but now we're letting, now Latin's influencing rhythm.
Although that's not the case. You see lots of rhythm. You see a much stronger bent knee in lots of the Latin dancing.
There is a stronger base.
Actually,
There is a stronger base, sparing the pro-ams and the amateurs. It's becoming tougher to win because, so there is.
Well, and even the top pro Latin dancers, let's be clear about something, everybody at home. It is, I'm going to guess, Michael, you tell me if I'm wrong. I'm going to say this as a fact. And then, Michael, you tell me if I'm wrong. I'm going to say this as a fact, having had no experience to prove it as a fact, but that's how I'm going to say it.
So an opinion.
There are times. No. Well, you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me, Michael, whether it's opinion or fact. There are times in Latin dancing when you are trained to walk to a bent knee when your foot touches the floor.
Samba.
What about your lockstep and cha-cha? Or your chasse and cha-cha?
Chasse, the lockstep, there is a flex. There is a flex.
So the concept of walking on a bent knee is not a new concept. It's utilized all over the place in Latin. What I thought was hilarious is there were lots of rhythm dancers who were kind of like me, not been trained rhythm, but good dance, or not been trained Latin, but became good dancers through being trained rhythm. And they were talking about how, you see Latin dancers bending their knee all the time for stuff now. And I'm sitting there thinking like, they always bent their knee. That's the most functional way to move at those speeds in that moment. I don't know, but now they're just picking that spot out to call and be like, well, you guys do that. Because everybody has to do different pieces, different techniques for different reasons.
Well, yeah, obviously, and we call that coming out of the default. Like if I'm dancing Latin, if there's a point where I'm just doing kind of like a grind motion, I can go on a press line, but that's not my default, and that's not the default of the dance. Now,
if somebody people don't get that.
Now, yeah, and the speed of cha-cha, it doesn't make sense that it's going to be straight there. So that's different. That's way different. Like rhythm, your default was supposed to be a flex knee. Now, if you're just dancing straight knees all over the place, your default is a straight leg. You're dancing out of category. But so it's a flex knee. Now,
and as much as I get what you mean when you say default, that default causes a problem because there is no default. You do things out of purpose always, and the lack of going into the specificity of what creates that purpose is the reason why we have all these arguments and miscommunications. And
the default is the technique. That's not. It's no different than that. If you're talking about the speed of it, if you're talking about cha-cha anywhere else,
the problem though is that the technique, like in rumba, like I could say the default is on your slow counts. You leave your foot that you're leaving on the ground as you swing your hip for as long as possible. But there is going to be a slow count in my open routine where I don't want them to do that. So just having a default, you create this kind of, I get the reason. Like I said, I get you have in general, but that's right. What it should be called. Like in general, we're going to walk this way. We're going to have you learn this to learn basic body actions, how the body works with itself. Not to learn this style of dance, but to learn how this body works with itself and how these pieces can be combined.
Yeah.
And then when you go into the dance, you have to get into all of the specifics. There is no one.
And honestly, that's why I called it advanced technique, because honestly, the default of the dance, not to disagree with you, but the default of the dance, or the default or the technique of the dance is what gives the dance the identity. The identity of Latin is that straight leg. Will we come out of default at times? Absolutely, but then we get right back into it. In American rhythm, is it acceptable for me in certain aspects to maybe dance a straight leg? Yes, but do I come back out of that and start dancing bent knees again? Absolutely. Okay. So there's always going to be a reason, like you just said, for coming out of that default. but there's still a default, and that default is what.
Well, but see, I don't think acknowledging the default is good. Not that way. Like the default should just change. We shouldn't say bent versus straight leg. We should say, the actual characteristics of the dance. Like, I mean, unless the bending and the straightening of the leg is the problem, and if it is, then describe why it's a problem. And when you do so, the default is irrelevant.